All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Gary Salman, CEO of Black Talent Security. Thank you, MicroDental, for hosting this event tonight. Let me give you a little background on myself because I think it's important you know who you're talking to. I've been in the dental technology space for almost 30 years. I built one of the very first cloud-based, it wasn't even called cloud back then, it's really internet-based systems back in the late 90s. I had this vision of why are we delivering practice management software through a traditional server? Why can't we deliver it through the internet? So I built up a pretty substantial client base servicing thousands of dental professionals all across the United States with practice management software that was delivered via the internet. A couple of years later, I ended up selling that company to what ultimately became Kodak and Carestream Dental. Worked there for many years. And then I saw this need / demand for security. I was getting phone calls from practices all over the country saying, hey, we got hit with ransomware. You know, our systems are down. Can you do anything to help us? And I said, unfortunately, there's not a lot I can do. But then I started connecting the dots and I said, you know what, I understand the internet and technology really well. And I had to deal with cybersecurity when we had our cloud environment a couple of years back. And I said, you know what, I think there's something here. How can we help dental practices protect themselves from cyber attacks, ransomware events, data theft, et cetera. I also have about 18 years of law enforcement experience. So if you think about what I do, it's very unique, right? We're dealing with criminals on a daily basis, right? Criminals that hit dental practices just like yours, encrypt their systems with ransomware and steal their data, right? And then there's also a very significant technological element to what we do. How do we try and prevent these things? Or, if you are a victim, how do we help you recover from them? I think the craziest analogy that I can come up with in terms of the world that I live in right now is this. Let's pretend you are the victim of a burglary. You call 911. And the dispatcher sends out me, law enforcement person, out to your office, to your house. And I drive up in my police car and you flag me down and you're like, officer, that moving van is unloading all of my belongings from my house. And then I say to you, all right, hold on a second. Here's the deal. Stay here. I'm going to walk up and talk to them and see what's going on. And you're like, what do you mean you're going to talk to them? Go arrest them. So I walk over to these guys that are unloading all of your belongings into this big truck. And I say, hey guys, who's in charge? And a guy comes out, I was like, I'm in charge. I was like, all right, what do you need? Well, I need $1 million in Bitcoin, and then I'll take all of their belongings and I'll just shove it back into their garage. So then I walk back to you, the victim, and say, hey, here's the deal. I need you to wire me $1 million in cash. I'm going to convert that to cryptocurrency. I'm going to pay these guys, and these guys are going to move all your stuff back into your house. And by the way, they've probably messed up the walls. They've cracked some windows and doors. They've damaged your house, but you're going to get all your stuff back conceptually. And you're like, what are you talking about? Just go arrest them, right? Conceptually, that's what's going on with ransomware right now, right? They're coming into your businesses, your practices. They're stealing all your data, they're encrypting all of your data, and then you got to pay to get it back. All right. So we're going to talk to you about how you can actually prevent this. And this is systemic. This is all across the United States. There are thousands and thousands of dental practices that have been hit by ransomware. And I'd be willing to bet almost everyone on this call probably has a colleague or a friend of a friend that's been a victim, right? That's how prevalent it is right now. So I'm going to introduce you to kind of some of the things that we're seeing from a cyber perspective. I'm going to walk you through a recent case that we just finished up where a practice was a victim of a $2.4 million ransomware event. And it's going to be shocking because you're probably thinking, oh, it's this massive DSO that was impacted, and it's not going to be that. All right. So I want to start off and play a little audio clip for you. Now, this is a case we dealt with firsthand. So keep in mind, I see both sides of these events. I see the prevention, right? Helping practices prevent these types of attacks, but I also specialize in helping practices recover from ransomware events. So this is a group up in New Jersey that was hit with ransomware. they didn't want to pay, right? They were having a hard time coming up with the money to pay the ransom demand, which at the time was a little over $100,000. So they asked us to go back to the hackers and offer a much lower amount. It really pissed off the hackers, for the lack of a better word. So here's what happened. Let me play the clip and we'll debrief it.
Hi, it's Josh from Help to Restore. Rob, why are you insulting us with this hilarious offer? 45,000 is nothing to us. We have seen your contract, invoices, documentation. We know that you have money. So stop us and let's get down to business, shall we? We would consider anything from 1,000, 100, 1,000. So I have to check our offer for you. Yes, we would consider anything from 100,000 and upward. If you continue to waste our time like that, we will start leaking your information. We will send it to your clients so they can see how secure their information is in your hands. We will send it to your competitors and also the local news, the local New Jersey media. The press just loves this kind of stuff, especially lately. Maybe we can.
All right, so imagine being in the position of these owners of this practice. These hackers were literally using anonymous Google phone numbers and calling the doctors every hour, on the hour, 24 hours a day, harassing them for payment, right? So a lot of people think, I got a backup. I'll just restore my data from the backup and this is all going to magically go away. It doesn't work that way anymore. These hackers are really, really aggressive. They will contact you through email. They will contact your employees. They will contact your patients. This is what's happening in the real world. This is not an audio clip I just found on the internet. This is, a victim that we dealt with directly. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the agenda, right? What are we going to cover today? And as you heard at the beginning, if you have questions, punch them into the chat. I'm happy to address them throughout the presentation or towards the end. I'll talk to you a little bit about what I like to call the broken mindset, right? We'll understand the financial and reputational impact of ransomware. It's a lot bigger than what most people think about. We'll discuss who's being targeted because most of you are probably like, what are the odds they're going to get me? They're not going to do a Google search and look for a practice in San Diego, California, and then hit me. We're going to help you understand why practices are getting hit. We'll talk very quickly about some of the different threat groups, these hacking groups that are targeting small and medium businesses throughout the United States. We'll talk a lot about the difference between IT and cybersecurity. That has to be your biggest takeaway, right? So many practices are being hit by ransomware because they're not understanding the differential between what your IT company provides and what cybersecurity companies provide. And then I'm going to give you some really strong takeaways, things that you can bring back to your practice and implement right away that actually enhances your security. And some of this stuff won't cost you a penny, right? And then we'll also distribute after the presentation, basically the top 10 ways to protect your data and network. So I'll give you a summary of it, and then we have a more detailed document, which we can get out to you as well. All right, so let's start off by talking about the broken mindset. So I lecture all over the country, lectured to about 13,000 healthcare providers over the last couple of years. And many times when I'm doing these live presentations, when I'm walking off stage, doctors will line up and ask me questions, right? Or I'll meet them at shows. And these are the typical things that I hear, folks just like you say, I'm too small. They're not going to come after my little dental practice. Okay, well, I'm going to help you understand how that's actually not true and how so many small dental practices are in fact being hit. They're never going to find me, right? So I talked about this a little bit. I'll tell you for the most part, the hackers are not actively searching for your practice. If someone tells you that, it's not really accurate. However, the hackers can scan millions and millions of IP addresses in a very short amount of time. And often your computers have vulnerabilities, your firewall, your modem. It's exposing your practice. The hackers will basically pop your practice up on their radar through some of the tools that they have. And then they're going to start breaking in. And they may have no idea that you're a dental practice. But once they get in and they realize they've hit a healthcare entity, it's like the pot of gold for them because they know in almost every case, a healthcare provider or healthcare practice will in fact pay the ransom. All right, we'll talk about this. Every client that calls us and says, hey, I got your name from a friend, I found you on the internet, we got hit with ransomware, and we help them recover, they all say something like this towards the end of the engagement. I thought my IT guy had my back, right? Or they think, maybe they're not a victim, they think that their IT vendor can protect them. So we're going to discuss this in a lot of detail, right? Because we got to understand what you need to do to protect yourself. I have insurance, right? You have to understand that insurance is good. We tell everyone to get cybersecurity insurance. The problem with insurance is it obviously doesn't prevent an attack, right? And a lot of times you may be underinsured. You don't realize how big these ransom demands are. You may not realize the amount of downtime you're going to have and the financial impact. So you may actually be underinsured. And there's a big shift occurring right now. A lot of dental practices are being denied cyber coverage because they do not have the proper security measures in place. So they'll send in an application for insurance, they'll get denied. Or they've had a prior claim denied, all right? I'm in the cloud. I hear this all the time. I don't have any patient data in my office. It's all in the cloud. So the first thing I will say is, you know what? We've done plenty of ransomware attacks against practices that are in the cloud. And believe it or not, we still find local patient data, x-rays, attachments, old data sets. If the hackers shut all your computers down via a ransomware attack, maybe your data's safe in the cloud, but you can't use your computers, right? So you can't access your data. You can't take x-rays, right? So that's a problem too. The recovery may be a little easier, right? But you're still going to be down for an extended period of time. Backups, all right? I'll set the record straight here. In a majority of the ransomware attacks that we deal with, the hackers gain access to all of your backups, your local backups, and in many cases, your cloud backups, and they destroy your backups. So you walk in, you see ransom notes on all of your computers, and you're like, hey, this is horrible, but thank gosh we have a backup. And then you call your IT guys like, all right, I'm going to look into this. 3 hours later, you're calling, hey, what's going on? I don't know. We're still looking into this. We're looking at the backups. 5 hours later, you're not getting a phone call back from your IT vendor. And it turns out there are no backups. The hackers gained access to them and wiped them. They do this because they know for businesses that have viable backups, they may not be willing to pay the ransom. But when the hackers take out the backups, they know you have no choice now. You're either going to lose your entire business because you've lost all your data, or you're going to pay them. Firewalls and what a lot of IT companies call next-gen antivirus software does not stop ransomware. It's that simple. I've had so many doctors say, well, I just bought a state-of-the-art firewall. I just upgraded my antivirus software. My IT guy said I'm good. So I want you to think about that statement. Think about it critically, right? If it was that simple, we wouldn't have this conversation right now. Right? Makes sense. If I could buy $5, $10 piece of software, throw it on each of my computers, buy a $500 to $1,000 firewall, have a block ransomware, there wouldn't be ransomware. There is no device that you can buy or piece of software that you can buy that blocks majority of ransomware. It doesn't exist, right? All these major Fortune 100 companies that get hit, you think they can't afford the state-of-the-art technology? Of course they can, but the hackers still get in, and we're going to talk about that. And then the mindset, which is really what I consider the strongest component of the broken mindset, which is, I'll be fine. I don't think this is going to happen to me. I've been on the internet for years, so don't need to worry about this. This is your livelihood. You have to fight for your livelihood. I'm going to walk you through the experiences of your colleagues and the stress and aggravation they go through. And you know what the first thing they do after the ransomware attack? They open their checkbook and they'll spend as much money as possible to make sure this never happens again, because they truly understand now the ramifications of these events. So let's talk about the opposite, the correct mindset. How do you get your mind in the right place? Well, the first thing you must think about is you need to put a cybersecurity program in place, right? Cybersecurity program is not a bunch of piecemeal things that your IT company puts together that creates this feel-good solution, right? They're like, oh, we have this new technology that stops ransomware. Doctor, you need this on your network. You're like, great. Just attended a lecture by this guy, Gary. He told me I need cybersecurity. Just throw that on and I'll be good, right? Yes, doctor, you'll be fine. I promise you. 2 weeks later, you turn around and you have ransomware in your network and you go back to your IT guy. How did I get ransomware? I thought you just put some new software. Well, it's not 100%. Here's the deal. There's no piece of software that stops ransomware, right? So I'm repeating myself because I want you to understand that concept, all right? The other problem is almost all of these hackers will steal all of your patient data. So even if you have the quote unquote Ferrari of antivirus software applications, it's not going to stop them from stealing your patient data, which I will argue is even worse than ransomware. All right, let's talk about the financial and reputational impact. So I'm going to start off with this case. This is a case we're literally just wrapping up, but this is a New England dental practice. It was a combo ortho and pediatric group, 6 locations. The interesting thing is they set up 4 different corporations. There were 6 partners. There's commingling of data. It was ugly, right? From a compliance standpoint, HIPAA. They had 4 servers, about 80 workstations, right? Which is about average. You figure an average practice has about 15 computers, right? So they're right there with about 80 computers. 3 different imaging systems, 2 different practice management software applications. They experienced 9 straight days of complete outage. Nothing functioned in their practice. And I will tell you, this is the average, right? Around 10 days is the average amount of time that any size dental practice, whether you're 6 computers or hundreds of computers, you will be shut down for about that amount of time, because it's a very comprehensive process that you have to go through to recover. It's not like you press some magic button on a backup and your system just comes back online, right? That's fantasy land. That doesn't exist. They got, meaning the hackers got every single backup, every workstation, every 2D and 3D imaging device, and all their servers and workstations were fully encrypted with ransomware. Literally 100% hit. Not a single device was spared. They had one of the largest managed service providers, fancy word for an IT guy. They still got hit. The interesting thing about this is the practice had actually met with this IT vendor a couple months before and expressed concern about the state of ransomware and impacting the dental community. And the IT vendor assured them, met with the 6 doctors, assured them over and over again, they had nothing to worry about. And then this happened. The hackers stole 190,000 files from the practice. They ripped off every single file on the network. And you're saying, well, how did no one know that? I will tell you, right? We secure about 1,000 dental practices. I've never, ever come across any IT company or any dental practice that has any type of technology that alerts the IT vendor that data is leaving the network. They just don't have it, right? Here's the most shocking part of this event. We work closely with the FBI in this case. The ransomware that hit this dental practice was literally brand new, had only been identified about a month before, and it was identified in a foreign country. And this practice was the 2nd business in the entire United States that was hit by what is now classified as the most advanced form of ransomware in existence. A dental practice, not a Fortune 100 company, not even a Fortune 1000 company, a dental practice. All right. This is a group, the hackers, meaning the group, meaning the hackers, is a reincarnation of dark side ransomware. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about dark side ransomware. Some of you may even remember them. They hit some critical infrastructure just back in the fall of 2021, but they were brought down. They quote unquote went out of existence, but the code and many of the hackers lived on, and they rebranded themselves and came back to life. So to put this into perspective, this is the real ransom note that was put on the computers in this practice. So typically when the hackers hit a system, they'll leave a ransom note or an email address, and that's how you know how much you have to pay. Look at the price tag, $390,000 per location. All right, so $2.3 million hit. That doesn't include all the other associated fees, business downtime, right? Inability to treat patients for about 9 days, fees to the IT company, fees to a company like ours, legal fees, right? This is way, way over $2.4 million. These doctors had to go out and borrow money to pay this ransom demand. Home equity lines of credit, tap retirement accounts, because you got to pay the ransom. Otherwise, the hackers will publish all of your patient data. Being pediatric and ortho put them even at a higher risk because they're children's records. The practice also didn't really believe that the hacker stole the data. And one of the things we did was prove to the practice and their attorneys, their counsel, that the hackers did in fact steal the data. This is a snapshot of the data that was taken. And you can see, right, nothing against the company listed there, but you can see some of the types of data that was taken. All right, so this is all real. I bet many of you probably use, software similar to this. So there is basically something known as the triple or quadruple extortion methodology that hackers use. So if you go back about 1.5 years, hackers just would encrypt your data, meaning they would apply their hacking tools to your system, and the ransomware code would encrypt or lock every single file on your network. So you can kind of see the files and you're like, oh, my files are there. But when you click on them, they won't open. So on the right side here, you can see some examples of this. There's some JPEGs and Word documents, DOCXs, some PNG files. This is a screen capture from an oral surgery practice that got hit with ransomware just a little while ago. And you can see the files are there, but no one can access them. You click on them, Windows doesn't know what to do with it because the file is locked by the hackers. So the hackers will steal your data. They will encrypt your data. If you refuse to pay, they will contact your data. If you have the email addresses of patients, there have been cases where they have emailed the patient saying, guess what I want to do? Guess what I'm going to do? I am going to email your patients. And then your patients start getting emails stating, tell Dr. Mary Smith to pay us, otherwise we're going to publish your records. Or they'll even say, there was a case with a plastic surgeon down south, and they emailed the patient saying, we have photographs of you. If you don't pay us $5,000, we're going to publish these photographs of you. And plastic surgeons typically have full body shots. Horrible situation for the doctor to be in. If you still refuse to pay the ransom, they will publish all of your patient records, right? All your photographs, your PANs, your periapicals, your intraoral scans, health history forms, driver's license, insurance cards will be all up for sale. And guess what? It's like an auction. You can go and preview the data. There are hacking websites that you can go to on the dark web, and you can see dental practice data up there. You'll see photos of the patients, right? You'll see everything related to that patient. And the hackers do that to prove to the buyer that they actually have this data. It's not fake. All right, let's talk a little bit about, and this won't be technical, but let's talk about how these attacks are executed. So hackers break into networks in one of two ways. The first way is by something called social engineering. People call it trickery, phishing, spear phishing, things like that. They trick the doctors, they trick these team members into clicking on something or giving up their credentials, and then they log right into your network. The other way is through a technical hack, where the hackers scan your network, find vulnerabilities on devices, find vulnerabilities on your firewalls, and just like you see in the movies, they will sit there and launch attacks against the network until they break in. Once they get onto a computer in your office, they will drop a hacking toolkit. It's very similar to a plumber coming into your house with a big red, toolbox sitting down on your kitchen floor, opening your cabinets and opening up their toolbox. Like, okay, I need this wrench. I need this soldering gun, right? I need this flux. The hackers will drop this toolkit on your network, and this toolkit will then start exploiting computers and devices on your network, and it will give them access to additional computers and most likely your server. And they can often execute this in a matter of minutes. They'll then sit on the network and conduct reconnaissance. So what does this mean? Well, they're going to want to know what you do. So they will sit there and watch everything you do for weeks, and you will have no idea that this is happening. And once again, your IT company will have no idea that this is occurring. They'll learn what cloud systems you use, where you back up, how you back up. They will drop hacking tools on your network that will steal your usernames and passwords, that will grab your keystrokes. So as you log into that backup solution, or as you log into that bank account, as you're typing on the keyboard, it's grabbing that information. And depending on the type of technology you may or may not have in place, they can then log into those technologies as well. They will exploit vulnerabilities. Okay, this is a major, major issue. Hackers exploit kind of open doors and windows on all the computers in your office in order to move around, right? And I've yet to come across a single IT company that deals with that, right? That's just not part of their skill set. But if you're not managing vulnerabilities on your computers, it's like leaving the front door of your house wide open and all your valuables scattered on a counter with signs saying, hey, here's my money, right? Here's my bank account, right? Here's all my valuable data. And then they just scoop it up and walk away. The hackers will then steal all your data, often over a couple of days. They will also install backdoors. We've had cases where a practice has been hit. The IT company comes in, they tell the doctor, oh, we fixed everything, you're good to go. 2 weeks later, they get hit again. Then they call us and they're like, how did this happen? How did we get hit twice in 2 weeks? This doesn't make any sense. We've gone years without getting hit. And then our security guys will get on the network and say, hey, well, here's the issue. Your IT guys didn't know what to look for, and we found backdoors, and these guys just click on an icon on their desktop and they get right back into your network. They destroy the backups. We've talked about that. They launch their ransomware code that encrypts all of the data. I will tell you that encryption is very quick. All right. They can typically hit a server in your workstations in a couple of hours. They often do it off hours. And all you do is walk in the next morning and the attack is over and it's done. Right. They pulled the pin on the hand grenade. They threw it into your office. And now they are just waiting for you to pay. They'll leave this ransom note. You have to pay the ransom in order to prevent the theft, the sale of your data, the release of your data. And the way that works is typically you're going to have to do it through a cyber company, right? They're going to, the practice is going to wire a company like ours money. Let's say the ransom is $200,000. They're going to get $200,000 into a checking account. They're going to wire it to us. We're going to convert it to cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. And then we're going to pay that money to the hackers. And then the hackers are going to turn a special tool over to us to decrypt the data. All right. But here's the deal. Most IT companies who want to try and do this themselves, they don't understand the federal laws. We've had practices that have paid ransom payments through their IT company. The IT company didn't do a background check on the digital wallet, and that puts the practice in a precarious situation. You may have just funded a nation state. You may have just paid terrorists $100,000, $200,000 because the proper procedures weren't followed to validate that you weren't making a payment to those organizations, right? There's a way to check that before you make the payment. So now all of a sudden you're like, I'm just a dentist. My practice is being destroyed. Now I just paid a nation state $100,000, $200,000. Whoa, I got a problem here. I'm going to be frank with you. Cryptocurrency is trackable. Not all of it. Most is though. Right. So if you think you're just going to make these payments and not have some type of government entity watching that, that's not how it works right now. All right. There's a lot of eyes watching these big cryptocurrency payments being made. And after the payment's made, you got to recover. Right. Even though the hackers send us the keys to unlock all your data, it's a very labor intensive process and it's very frustrating. It's not like it's some, incredibly well-written piece of code that you just run on the computers and a couple hours later, everything just works again. Unfortunately, is never the case. It can take days and days to decrypt your network. The hackers will encrypt in a very short amount of time, but the decryption takes a long time and often has to be run over and over again. Then you got to rebuild everything, right? Every computer that's been hit, the hard drive has to be formatted. The operating system has to be reinstalled, right? And you got to put all your practice management systems back in, your imaging systems, your text messaging, everything you have has to get reinstalled. It's as if someone came in and wiped all of your computers clean and you're starting from scratch. All right. Let's talk about these back doors in a little bit more detail because I think this is very important. We did a case in Connecticut about 2 years ago where the hackers installed a product just like this. This is a very, very sophisticated surveillance product that could be used for legal purposes, but hackers use it for obviously legal purposes. When we got on the network and did our forensics investigation, it was determined that the hackers actually installed this piece of software on every computer. So in all of their consult rooms, surgical rooms, right, front desk, doctors' offices. Many of these computers had webcams on them. So when we did our forensics investigation, we were able to determine to the exact second the hackers turned the web cameras on, the microphones on in the practice. We went back, had a meeting with the two doctors, actually a father and a daughter. And we said, hey, were you in your office, your personal office, sitting in front of your computer at this time? And she said, I'm always in front of my computer at that time. We said, well, unfortunately, they turned your camera on and they were listening to everything you did and watching your screens. And she broke down in tears. It's heartbreaking to see this stuff. But talk about feeling violated, right? They're watching every email you write, every email you read, every website you go to. This is real, right? This is no joke with in terms of what's going on right now. So I want to talk about this because this is something that a lot of people in this profession are afraid to talk about. And if you've had the unfortunate opportunity to be a victim yourself, or you have a colleague that wants to talk about their victimization, they're going to tell you basically what I'm going to say to you, that they will have gone through some of the most extreme stress and aggravation in their entire lives. Right? They are literally watching their livelihoods evaporate in front of them. You have no idea whether or not you're going to be able to get your data back. And then think about all the issues related to that. Patients are going to come in and you'll be like, oh, sorry, I got to take x-rays on you again. Well, you just took x-rays on my 14-year-old. Now you're telling me 2 weeks later, you need to retake, full mouth series, right? Over and over again. People are very radiation, conscious. It's aggravating. The team, right? Think about what they're going through, not only the doctors, but the team. I've been on site with some of these events. I've had team members pull me aside like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And they'll pull me aside and I'll say, yeah, what's going on? They're like, so I clicked on something yesterday. If this is my fault, am I going to be liable? Am I going to get fired? Right? Did I cause this? It's really frustrating. And they're dealing with all the patients who are calling, right? Because they want information, or more likely, guess what's going to happen? Those patients for the next couple of weeks, they're all showing up. Every day, all those patients that were scheduled are showing up. Why? You don't know who's scheduled because your scheduler, right? Your practice management software is encrypted with ransomware. So for weeks, these patients are showing up and then they get the story. I took the whole day off from work. I had to get a babysitter for my child. This cost me hundreds of dollars. You know how patients are. This is what happens. I will tell you for a fact, most doctors who have gone through this suffer from PTSD. Every day they walk into their practice, they're wondering, am I going to see skull and crossbones on my computers again? Especially at the 1-year anniversary, right? They remember this. Oh my gosh, it was 1 year. 1 year ago today, we got hit with ransomware. It's also this complete invasion of privacy. Think about everything on your network being exposed, both from a professional and a personal perspective. A lot of people have laptops hooked up that have photographs of their family members, right? Friends, emails, personal stuff. It's all exposed. So there's a lot more to this than, hey, I have a backup and I'm going to recover. All right. So The financial impact is substantial. I'm talking as a nation. This is a study that was done by the US Treasury Department in the first 2 quarters of last year. And they determined, and this is just what they could track, that during that period of time, $590 million in crypto payments were made to hackers. And that's just stuff that they could track. If you extrapolate that over the next 6 months for a total of a year, we are talking way over $1 billion just in ransomware payments. We're not even talking about the financial impact, right? All the compliance and legal and business interruption that was caused by these types of events, right? This is costing many billions of dollars to US businesses every year of all types and all sizes. All right, I think we kind of covered this already. So let's talk about who's being targeted. And this is a very important part of what we're talking about today. It doesn't matter what size you are. It doesn't matter if you're mom and pop or part of a large DSO, everyone's being hit equally. They're also targeting your IT companies. We've dealt with a lot of these attacks where the hackers actively go after IT companies, hit their systems, and because your IT company has connections back to your computers, they use your IT company's computers to hack your computers, right? We've dealt with many cases where this has been the methodology, and it is an utter disaster because none of these IT companies have enough personnel to help their customers recover. Some of them actually just go out of business. All right, so this is an issue, right? Many practices don't understand this risk and aren't asking the right questions. So one of the big takeaways that I can give you is this: go to your IT companies tomorrow and say, hey, which cybersecurity company is protecting you? How often do they audit you? Can you share a recent security report with me? And if they come back and say, doctor, come on, we're in IT, we do this for a living. We don't need another company analyzing the security or risk of our network. If that's the type of answer you get, I advise you to find a new IT company, right? Because they don't understand what's going on. If they don't even understand this basic concept, how can they protect you? It's just a fact. If you look at what hospitals are doing and large physicians groups, they will vet every single vendor that has any connection or technology in their network. If I have a new technology and I want to sell it into a hospital system, before I can even walk into that hospital, the hospital will say, send me all the security assessments for your technology, whether it's a med pump, an X-ray unit, etc. They understand the risk. But in dental, no one's really doing this. And then they become a victim because they just don't know. This is an article that was published in October of 2021. Law firm BakerHostetler basically said that 1/3 of all healthcare organizations were the victim of a ransomware attack. That was some data by Sophos. And then they said that of all their clients that they service, 20% were in healthcare, right? Pretty substantial. So who's targeting small and medium business, right? That's really what you are. So here's something that's really interesting. The Colonial Pipeline was hit by dark side ransomware. Sound familiar? JBS Meat Distribution was hit by R-Evil. While these attacks were being executed, we were working with multiple dental practices that were also targeted by these groups. So here's a practice that maybe does whatever, call it around $1 million, maybe more if you're a little larger, maybe a little less. And here are multi-billion-dollar entities. And these hackers, they're hitting both ends of the spectrum at the exact same time. Can't argue it, right? Those are just the facts. So where do these attacks originate? So I will tell you almost everything comes out of Russia, right? China does some, it's limited. They're more into the intellectual property theft game. There are a lot of hackers in Ukraine. I know it's not optimal right now. And Iran and North Korea are getting into this as well because there's a lot of money being generated. They utilize the dark web and VPNs to hide and evade from law enforcement. It is often very difficult to find these hackers, but you know, our government's getting better and better, but most operate in these foreign countries. What do you think is going to happen? You think we're going to call up Russia and tell the Kremlin to turn these guys over to the United States. The FBI wants them. Doesn't really happen, right? Unless there's some, swap going on. They are highly sophisticated. I will tell you, which is mind-boggling when you hear what I'm about to say, they run what I call illegitimate, legitimate businesses, right? I know it doesn't make any sense. However, they have HR departments, they have marketing, they have sales. You're gonna be like, well, who would they sell to? I'm gonna talk to you about that in a second. They have tech support, development. Some of these operations generate $250 million a year. And there's hundreds and hundreds of criminals that are behind these organizations. Some of them offer something called ransomware as a service. So let's just say you want to get into this game. You're like, yeah, I got 10 grand. What the heck? You pay these hackers 10 grand. They give you the entire toolkit to execute these attacks. And then what happens is when you get a successful attack and you receive a payment, they take 40%, 30%, you get 60, 70%. So they're basically taking a chunk of the money, right? So you could be a low-level hacker. You can get the most advanced code if you have the dollars, and you're kind of in a trusted circle. So this is an issue. Here's another interesting thing. Some of these may be nation states. Do you know what some of the insurance policies are starting to write into their policies per se? They are starting to say, if the insurance carrier determines that this is a nation state that hacked you, we will not cover you from an insurance perspective. They walk away from the claim. What do you do now? Right? So this is a major issue that a lot of risk management consultants are starting to talk about. Big, big problem coming down the pipe. So what does this actually look like? Well, this is a ortho practice out in the Southwest in Arizona that got hit, and they were demanding $550,000 from this group. Not a large group, very small actually. So we go on to the hackers' dark web website and literally have real-time communications with the hackers. We'll start messaging them through their chat window, and they'll start instantly talking back to us. It's no different than you going to your favorite travel website and saying, hey, I need to change my reservation, and an agent starts chatting back with you. It's crazy, right? You just can't make this stuff up. So I'm not going to cover most of these topics here, but networks are typically being compromised for two primary reasons. One is the theft of information, such as intellectual property or personally identifiable information for like identity theft. The primary reason is ransomware and extortion, right? That's where they're making a lot of money. And from your perspective, the two risks for you are obviously the theft of your patient data, right? Because you have state and federal laws to deal with when that happens. And then, the extortion, right? The demand to not publish your data and to turn the keys over to unlock your data. So this is our analysis, right, of tons and tons of ransomware attacks we've done in the dental space. 75% of all the cases we've done have resulted in the theft of the practice's data. 3 out of 4 practices have their data stolen. I will tell you that on the very low end, a small practice should expect to pay around 45 grand just for the ransom demand. I can tell you, I've also seen small practices hit for 6 figures. All right. The overall event is going to cost most single provider practices $150,000, right? Cash gone, right? Most practices pay the ransom, as I said before, to prevent the release of the data. So the attorneys will typically say, doctor, I understand you have a viable backup and that's good, but if you don't pay these criminals, they will publish your patient records. Our recommendation is you pay them. All right, so how are networks actually compromised? I'm not going to make this technical. I'm going to give you kind of an overview of how this is occurring. So I mentioned this earlier. They're either going to exploit your network through your people or through technical vulnerabilities. All right, so let's dig into those a little bit. So we classify human vulnerabilities, your people, as click risk. right? And the types of emails that result in click risk are phishing, which I'll share with you in a couple minutes so you can understand that. Spear phishing, which is extremely damaging. And I'll explain why so many people fall for spear phishing. Smishing, which is becoming more popular, is text messaging, right? Where you get a text message that appears to be coming from Chase, from Bank of America, American Express, Amazon. And you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, these companies have my cell phone number, so this has to be legit. You click on the link, it opens up a page that looks like Chase Bank or American Express. You punch in your username and password, and you just gave the criminals your login credentials. Business email compromise is typically wire fraud. I'm not going to cover that here because we just don't have enough time. Computer tech fraud, that's where someone calls up and pretends to be your software vendor, your hardware vendor, your IT company, and convinces someone at your practice to give them access to your network. And then phishing, phone calls, right? I think people are getting smarter with this. Someone calls up and says, hey, Dr. Jones, this is Mary from Chase Bank. I want to let you know there's been some fraudulent activity. Can you confirm your bank account information, your social security number? And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm flying out tomorrow to France. I need this credit card. And you start rattling off all this information and you got caught in a scam. So phishing typically comes from companies or entities you recognize: Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Chase, and it's reactionary. You get an email from Amazon saying there's a problem with your order, or you've placed a new order. And you're like, what? I've been with a patient for the last 2 hours. I didn't place an order. Oh my gosh, I bet my kid ordered something again. I told her not to do that. Click, boom, you get hit, right? Because they're soliciting a response. So the best way to defeat these types of attacks is don't click on the links in these emails. Instead, open up your browser or the app on your cell phone, navigate to the real website by typing in the web address or popping that app open and then logging in. And if there's a problem, you know what? All these companies will alert you the second you log in, right? So don't click if you don't need to. Spear phishing is what gets so many practices. Now, here's what is going on right now so you understand. I will tell you multiple times per week, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, I'm receiving phone calls saying, hey, I'm a dental practice. We just got hit with an email attack. All our emails been compromised. It came from the orthodontist down the street. Their email got hit. And then the hackers emailed us. And because I recognized my friend, the orthodontist there, I clicked on the link and now our email got hit and everything's exposed. It spirals out of control. Then you start realizing, well, the hackers are now sending these same emails to other people I interact with, other doctors, colleagues, referrals, patients, vendors. And now those individuals are clicking on this stuff because they recognize that name of that doctor or that individual from the practice. And it spirals out of control and it's a PR disaster for the practice. So yeah, your practice management software didn't get hacked, but your email got hacked, and it's almost, similar type situation. Many practices have to report to the government because their email got hacked, and it costs them a lot of money. So technical vulnerabilities are basically these open doors and windows on your network that hackers are constantly scanning for, finding, and then basically chipping away until they get into your office. Now, this is a great example. That fence is your firewall. In this case, your firewall is not configured properly. But in your mind, you walk by your storage closet, you see the little box with all the lights beeping, 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 right? Or blinking, I should say. And it says firewall, and you're like, oh, thank God, that thing is great. Glad I have the latest generation firewall. I will tell you for a fact, 60% of the firewalls we test are not configured properly from your IT company. They're just not. All right. So what the hackers do is they scan the firewall, which is represented by this gate. They analyze and like, oh, hold on a second. So I'm just going to take my 4-wheel drive truck and I'm going to drive around the right side of this gate and just get back up on the road and break into this house. But you're looking at this and saying, oh, that's probably like 6 to 8 foot fence. There appears to be a heavy chain on it with a lock. These guys are going to have to come with some equipment to break through this. That's not how the hackers work. right? They're going to scan those devices, find these vulnerabilities, and start exploiting them. There are specific toolkits that the hackers have that exploit specific types of vulnerabilities, and it's just a matter of time before they will get in, right? So your firewalls, the computers on your network, they have to be configured properly. They shouldn't have high-risk vulnerabilities. But I will tell you, on the inside of your network, your computers, over 90% of your computers right now have critical and urgent, right, very high-risk vulnerabilities on them. Facts, right? Antivirus software does not find vulnerabilities. It's not what it's designed to do. We've never come across an IT company that scans the computers for vulnerabilities. Or they'll tell you, oh, well, we have a tool. It's like a HIPAA compliance tool. It'll look for this stuff. Doesn't work. Okay. It's a single point of time that gathers some basic data, but it's not really looking for the hardcore vulnerabilities that hackers are exploiting. Another issue, which I don't have a lot of time to talk about, is your credentials are for sale. An email comes in, you punch in a username and password because you think it's a legit email telling you to reset your password. Hackers grab your username and password, and then they auction it off. All right. So you can go onto the dark web right now and buy people's IP addresses, which is your firewall address, their username, their passwords, their various types of applications, VPNs, servers, and they'll even tell you what type of business it is, potentially how much data is there. And then it's a bidding process, like you're on eBay, bidding up this access to this network. Remote access, probably one of the most dangerous things you can do. Many of you have remote access into your system. So from home, you can maybe pop in some chart notes from the day. Patient calls, wants a script written. You log into your software, make sure they're a patient of record, right? Write the script, send it out electronically. Like, oh, that was easy. That was great. Many IT companies do not configure remote access properly. They do not implement proper security measures, and then hackers will scan for these. Your remote access is sending out a beacon, just waiting. Hey, I'm here. Remote access is here. Beep, 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 beep. Hackers will scan for that, find that little beacon on your machine indicating that there's remote access, and they will sit there and plug away until they get in. Now, there are many technologies that can be put in place to mitigate that risk, but I find that most practices who have remote access do not have it implemented properly, either because just the facts, they didn't want to spend any money on it and they wanted to use a free service, or their IT company didn't know how to configure it properly. All right. I've seen a lot of breaches that have occurred because remote access is not configured properly. We had a case in New England just recently, a single provider practice where the doctor had remote access installed on her home computer, and it obviously remoted into the office. Guess what? The office didn't get hit. They hacked into her home computer. They got onto her desktop. They saw an icon for the office. They double-clicked the icon. They remoted right into the office, and then they deployed their ransomware right through her home computer. Shut the whole office down for 2 weeks, right? Cost them about $175,000 because of that mistake, right? Things like this, they're preventable, right? But unfortunately, you don't know what questions to ask. So that's the reason I'm giving this to you. All right, let's understand the difference between IT and cybersecurity, and we'll start wrapping up here. So what I like to say is everyone has a Dave the IT guy. Now, we're super supportive of IT companies. We work with about 150 different IT companies across the United States. Every practice kind of needs an IT company. They keep your computers up to date. They fix things, right? They add new computers. They replace computers. They're really important. But IT companies are classified as generalists, just like an internist, right? Your primary care physician is a generalist. They're not a specialist. Let's take an example of cardiothoracic surgeon, right? They're a specialist. You go to your generalist, the generalist listens to your heart and says, yeah, Dr. Smith, listen, I think you're going to need a triple bypass. Here's the deal. I just built an operatory right next to my exam room here. I'm going to walk you over there. We're going to hook you up to general anesthesia. I'm going to crack your chest. We'll do a triple bypass right here and you'll be good. what do? You grab your clothes and run as fast as you can out of that office, right? Still a doctor, but plays a very different role. They're not a specialist, right? They're not a cardiothoracic surgeon. And the reverse is true also. You have a cold, you have a problem, you're not going to the cardiothoracic surgeon to have him or her solve that problem for you. So think of your IT company as the generalist and think of a cybersecurity company as a specialist. The other big thing to understand, and this is critical, you can't have your IT company auditing their own security. I ask this question to everyone that I do live presentations to. I say, all right, show of hands. Who has ever sat down with their IT company and had them walk in with a list of all the security problems on your network? And in 4 years, I've had like 2 people raise their hand. And I'll challenge you with that right now. Has your IT company ever come in, shown you a document where it indicates all of the high-risk vulnerabilities you have on your network? They don't do it, right? They just don't do it. You can't have an IT company auditing their own security because they're not going to come out and tell you, hey, we stink, right? We're not doing a good job at securing your network. Everyone that's been breached swore they had a good IT company. They thought they were covered. All right, so one of the things you need to start thinking about is implementing cybersecurity solutions. And this is the cost of doing business, unfortunately, right? So think about, budgeting for it and actually implementing it. It's not a piece of software that you just drop onto your computer. Your IT company will convince you that that's the case. That doesn't work. All right, we must change the way we think. These events will change your lives permanently. There's no doubt, right? If you talk to your colleagues, like I alluded to before, this is life-changing when these events occur. So I put together a nice little matrix for you, showing you what your IT company typically does, and then what a good cybersecurity company will do for you, right? So we have the generalist versus the specialist. Credentialing. Could you imagine going to a primary care physician that's not an MD or a DO? However, what the IT companies are now doing is they're seeing it as a revenue stream, and they hang a shingle on their website and they say, doctor, we do security. And you're like, sounds good. Hook me up. They don't have a single employee within their business that is credentialed in cybersecurity. So one of the questions you have to ask is, hey, what are the credentials of your individuals? If you don't have, or if they don't have these 2 acronyms, CISSP or HCISPP, they're not credentialed security folks. These are board certifications that real security people have. There aren't a lot of them across the United States. All right. They have to go through advanced training, continuing education. I will tell you that most cyber firms are connected to law enforcement, right? Sharing of information, going to them for help, them coming to us for help. It's a tremendous resource for both parties. Cybersecurity companies also specialize in incident response, meaning when a company is hit by a cyber attack, they know how to handle that from A to Z and everything that's involved. IT companies try and get involved and they don't understand a lot of the laws, the compliance issues, forensics. That's not what they do. I will tell you that insurance companies that insure businesses for cyber losses, they don't hire IT companies to mitigate the loss. They hire cyber firms that specialize in it, right? They know the correct entity to go to. So how do you fight back? In the end, this is a team approach. I tell everyone this. This is your IT company, everyone in your practice, and a cybersecurity company kind of working together to protect you. That's how this works. If you're missing any part of this equation, you don't really have a solution. You have something that maybe feels good. You have to build strong, resilient systems. This concept of having one piece of technology to protect you just won't work. It's like a locksmith coming to your house and saying, you don't need cameras, you don't need an alarm system, get rid of your dog, I'm just going to put this deadbolt on your front door and you're good to go. Now, some people will believe that and they're like, okay, sure, sounds good. You seem like an honest person. But that's really what's happening right now in the IT space in the dental world. This is a great slide to take a picture of, right? Or do a screen capture. Top 10 ways to build a resilient system. We will distribute a PDF file after this presentation with some more details on this, but you have to use strong, unique passwords. right? You have to implement multi-factor authentication. Now, most of you know this as 2FA, two-factor authentication. It's typically where you log into a website, and after you punch in your username and password, the application sends you a text message with like a 5 to a 6-digit code, and you punch that in. What that does is that protects you from someone that has stolen your username and password, because that text message is typically going to your cell phone, which they do not have. Encrypting data at rest. Make sure you have online and offline backups. What does that mean? Go old school. Many IT companies are like, doctor, you don't need an external hard drive. That's like from, 2015. We're not doing that anymore. But they don't. Yes.
I totally apologize. Can I excuse the interruption? I want to announce that at this point, anybody that has stayed for the hour, they will get their C credit.
Okay, go for it.
We want to continue, and there's also a question and answer section, but we are recording. So if somebody needs to leave, we will make this presentation available to them if they miss something, but I don't want anybody to worry as they get their C at this point. Okay,
no problem.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, so as I said, we're going to send some of this out to you with detailed explanations on what you need to do, but you need to have an external backup, right? These are these small little hard drives that you can get. Usually get 3 of them. You plug them into your server. Every night you back up all your data. You disconnect that drive from the computer, bring it home with you, plug a new drive in, and back up again. That hard drive that's sitting on your dining room table may be the only savior you have, right, in these types of events. All right, and then some of these other things are really important. Under federal law for HIPAA, you have to conduct cybersecurity awareness training. Every employee and every doctor in your practice needs to know how to identify threats that come in through email, through the use of the internet. If you get hit with an attack and you have to report, one of the things the government will ask you is, let me see the proof that you trained your staff. And I will tell you, most practices do not have that proof, and it puts them in a precarious situation. All right, so password managers, just a couple more slides and we'll wrap up. Password managers are very important. LastPass, Dashlane, you can do a little Google search, you'll find these. These password managers store your passwords to all the websites and applications you use, and they also create very strong passwords for you. So the concept here is that every website you go to, every application you use must have a unique password. And the reason for that is if your password is stolen from that website, the hackers can't take your username and password and use it on another website. All right, multi-factor authentication we already covered. We covered the backups in some detail. This is another great slide to take a picture of. This is a breakdown of the minimum solutions needed to be secure. So one of the things I'll challenge you with right now is what's missing from your security layer, right? So as you look through A through K, say to yourself, hey, do I have all this? And this is keep in mind, this is bare minimum, right? This is what's needed in order to be relatively secure. And this all builds on the concept of these resilient systems, these multi-layered approaches. And what I say to everyone, and I've said it before, is you got to stand up. You got to stand up for yourself. You can't be passive, submissive anymore, right? This is your livelihood. So we'll start with A through D. That's what most of you have right now. Your IT company or your managed service provider provides a firewall, antivirus, secure email, and cloud backups. Absolute minimum. You also need to start into using multi-factor authentication. Guess what, guys? That's free, right? You should be able to go to a majority of your banking email systems and enable multi-factor authentication. It takes 2 minutes. There's some technology called endpoint detection and response, which is more advanced technology than traditional antivirus, which is what most of you have. Most of you are using old school antivirus, right? Old school antivirus has a dictionary of known threats. If you open an attachment and that attachment's malicious, it's going to look antivirus, or the antivirus is going to look in its dictionary and say, hey, is this attachment malicious? Is it in my dictionary? If the answer is yes, it probably will block it. If it can't find it in its dictionary, it's like, come on in. And then you get hit with ransomware, or you get hit with malicious code. So EDR starts to use some artificial intelligence to determine whether a piece of code is malicious or not. I will tell you, in order to get insurance, you are going to start to be required to have at least EDR. The next evolution is XDR, right? That's what we're putting on a lot of our client systems right now. XDR has some more advanced artificial intelligence. It's able to look at your whole network and with fractions of a second, understand what's going on and make decisions as to whether to kill malicious code. It can even now isolate computers from other computers on your network that it deems to be infected with some type of malicious code or ransomware. Very effective technology, right? And you need someone to watch that, right? You can't just drop this technology on it and let it be fully autonomous. It is capable of doing that, but you still need someone to look at the data to pick up things, because even though AI, artificial intelligence, is good, it's not the end all to be all. You got to do training, right? You got to engage in cybersecurity awareness training. This is a huge win. Educating your employees and doctors stops a lot of attacks. It's not, 100%. Some people say it's like 75. I will tell you our experience, it's a little lower than that. A lot of technical vulnerabilities are being exploited. And keep in mind, the hackers know that more and more people are being trained, so they're shifting their attack methodology and they're going after vulnerabilities more now because they know the people aren't falling for these scams as much as they used to. You have to have your computer scanned in real time for vulnerabilities. This is not antivirus software. This is going back to that gate in the field, and this internal vulnerability scanners will look at your computers every 6 hours to determine if they're vulnerable. And then they'll report that data back to a cybersecurity company who then can make decisions and help your practice secure their devices better. Your firewalls must be tested at least every month. Software on those firewalls go out of date. We've seen many cases where the IT company has made a mistake on your firewall, misconfigured it, and then the practice gets hit within a couple of hours. I will share with you something very interesting. We set up what are called honeypots, right? We'll take servers, we will purposely expose certain things on the internet, and typically within a couple of minutes to 24 hours, those servers will get hit. That's how quickly hackers find these exposed devices. So you have to have a vulnerability management program in place to identify all these risks, classify these risks, and then provide recommendations on how to eliminate these risks. A penetration test, you may have heard this. This is where ethical hackers that work for cyber companies will come in and they will attack your network as if they're a criminal. And if they're able to break in, then a meeting is called with the practice and the IT company and say, hey guys, here's how we broke in. Here's the type of data we could have had access to. But more importantly, here's how you fix this. And then a security risk assessment, believe it or not, required under HIPAA. You have to conduct a risk assessment. This is where typically a risk management consultant, a cyber company is going to come in, ask you 75 to 100 questions related to your technology and your operations, and then make recommendations back to you on how you can be more secure. It's not technical tests. This is all just question and answer. All right, so we probably have some questions. Here's my contact information. I'm an open book, right? I truly believe in education and helping people, and doctors will sometimes reach out to me for advice. That's what this is all about. This is a community. Everyone's got to help one another in order to, try and prevent these types of events. And that's my goal here, to give you the proper information so you can make an educated decision. Because your colleagues that get hit, they always say something like this: if I had only known that this was a risk, I would have done something different. It's easy to say that after the fact. It's harder to do that prior to an event, because most of the time, doctors like yourself, you have no idea, right? They don't talk about this in dental school, right? And it's not being talked about at many meetings, but this is becoming more and more popular, right? Some of the national associations are starting to talk about this a lot, but it's only in the last, year or so that's becoming front and center. So, if you want to reach out to me, this goes right to my calendar. You can, book some time with me, and happy to chat with you, whatever you like. My email address is there, and my direct line. But we do have some questions. Okay, so the first question is, I'm confused. What should I do right away if my practice is hit by ransomware? Okay, great question. So the first thing you want to do is, if you suspect or know that your system has been hit by ransomware, it's usually very obvious. There's a ransom note on your screen, there's skull and crossbones, your systems aren't working. The first thing you want to do actually is disconnect your internet. So go to the modem, right? That's your internet connection. Pull the power cord out of the wall. That should shut off your internet. And then to confirm it, go to your computer, open your browser, and type in google.com. If it says it can't load the page, you're most likely disconnected from the internet. Right? What that does is if hackers are in your system at that moment, that kicks them out, right? That cuts off their connectivity to your office. Don't turn off computers. Most IT companies will say, turn off all your computers right away. That is absolutely the wrong answer. Do not turn your machines off. I know it's counterintuitive, but what happens there is some of the forensics data that can help determine whether or not your patient records were stolen or accessed is lost when you power down these machines. So don't turn the computers off, right? Fight that urge from your IT company to do that. If you have multiple offices that are connected together, I recommend that all of the offices, even if they don't appear to be impacted, you do need to shut down the internet there. It is possible, and in many cases this happens, the hackers have access to every single one of your locations. You just may not be aware of it yet. Or you could have interrupted the attack. You walk in, they already hit your main office, they're starting to work on remote office 2, 3, and 4, right? So you have the opportunity to maybe stop it. So immediately disconnect the internet. The next thing you want to do is you want to seek out a company that specializes in incident response, right? Like a company like ours, that's what we specialize in. They can guide you through the correct processes and procedures to hopefully get you to a good place versus bringing in your IT companies who are only focused on getting you back up and running. All right. You cannot think that way. We deal with this with every doctor. They're saying, I got to see patients tomorrow. And we'll say that's not going to happen. Right. I understand how detrimental this is to your practice, but if you don't go through the right procedures to recover from this event, this is going to be way worse than you can ever imagine. All right. So you got to seek out specialists. If you have cyber insurance, you want to immediately call your carrier, right? And your agent and let them know, hey, I've got a cyber incident here. I need to open a claim. Sometimes the challenges with these insurance companies are it happens over the weekend, can't get a hold of anyone. And sometimes, especially during peak ransomware events where businesses all across the US are getting hit, it may take 48 hours before anyone is able to open a claim for you. They just don't have the bandwidth. So you're going to sit idle for 2 solid days, maybe 4 days if it happens, let's say on a Friday, and you can't do anything, right? Your hands are tied because you may have to pay out of pocket at that point. And some of these insurance companies won't reimburse you. All right. So keep in mind, insurance is good, but there are some limitations. We've had practices that have been hit. You can't get their insurance agent on the phone. It's around the holidays. And there's 2 options. You either pay out of pocket and maybe you get reimbursed, or you wait until the claim is open. And then sometimes the claim is open and all the attorneys are tied up across the United States. There's no incident response companies available to take the case right away because they're all jammed up, right? Many times these attacks are cyclical and it's tough, right? But you need to have the mindset that I got to do this thing right. The analogy that I give to all the doctors is you see a house on fire and you immediately run in and get burned really bad, or you wait for the fire department, for instance, they put on their fire suits, run in and save the day and no one gets hurt, right? So that's kind of, what you got to think about. Not focus on recovery, focus on protecting your practice from a legal perspective. That's the big thing. All right. See if we have any other questions.
That was a great answer, Mr. Salman.
Is it?
Another question that we had coming in is from an anonymous doctor. How many external backup drives should you have?
Okay, so great question. I recommend about 3 external drives. Obviously, it depends on the size of your practice, but you should have kind of, or I should say, you should take the old school approach, right? If you've been in practice for a while and used to take an external device home with you, you would usually label one device Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A second device would be labeled Tuesday and Thursday, and the third device would typically be labeled weekly backup. So I usually recommend 3, but keep in mind, you should only have one of those devices connected to your network. The other 2 have to be either in a drawer or in a safe or home with you. If they're connected to the network, when the cyber attack occurs, they're most likely going to be compromised. So I recommend 3. Keep in mind, these devices are super cheap. You're talking like $100 per device. Make sure IT company encrypts it. So if someone steals the physical hard drive, they can't get at your data. Make sure IT company configures it properly, but correct. You need about 3 devices. Dr. P wrote, what's the average cost for hiring a cyber firm for, let's say, a small practice that has 6 to 8 terminals? Prices range from like $299 a month and up, depending on what services you want. So that's usually a good starting point. $299 to say $499 will provide most of the services you need, or if not all of the services you need from a cybersecurity perspective. So it's not a little bit amount of money, but you're not talking $10,000, $20,000.